college football TV ratings. Let's jump into that. Bank on It, brought to you by a commercial bank. Life Made Better, member FDIC. You say that the ratings are a sign that the college football playoff in its inaugural 12-team season was an utter disaster and a fiasco. Caleb, why do you feel so strongly about that?
It was a total disaster. The national title game drew 22.1 million viewers. They regularly drew 25 million during the 14 college football playoff, and it got up to the 30s in some cases. Now, some people are going to bring up, well, what about the Georgia TCU game of 2022-23? Yeah, that was a 65-3 blowout. Everybody turned that game off midway through because it was a horrible game. But there were a lot of other better rated games during the college football playoff during that time. So just for a quick stat, a total of 170.5 million people tuned in to the college football playoff this year. That's 15.5 million per game. The 14 college football playoff over 10 years averaged 22.22 million per game. So nearly 7 million more per game during the 14 college football playoff. Now, I'm not naive. Okay, let me be upfront. Just by sheer nature of games, you're going to have more people see the 12-team college football playoff, so you're going to make more money. So it's 170.5 million versus 66.67 million because it was only 3 games. I get that. I'm not naive. But you're missing the whole story if you look at it that way. Because, Dave, let's start with this. The expanded playoff benefited from the novelty this year, right? The first year of anything has the novelty concept that brings in more viewers.
Yes.
So it's not going to repeat what it just did, guys. I'm just telling you guys that up front. It's not going to repeat. This was the novelty year, so the ratings were going to be as good as they ever will be. Okay?
I disagree. I completely disagree. I think they'll be better. I think the college football playoff is going to determine what they got right and wrong. There were times we didn't know when the games were on. I knew 10 years ago that the conference championship games would be at 3 and 6:30. I didn't know when the college football playoff games were going to be. So there has to be some sort of consistency to that. They'll learn that and they'll fine tune the matchups. So I completely disagree that it can't get better from here. The NFL's ratings have just gotten better over the years.
The NFL has done one. The NFL lives and breathes parity to a certain degree that college football never can.
I think it will. I think it will.
I don't think it will.
I think the top 40 programs, after what I saw Notre Dame do, and you pointed out earlier with essentially a first team and half of the second team. No, I think that you can stay healthy and be in the right position at the end of the year.
I don't think it can ever get to the level of parity of the NFL. The NFL has marketed and taken over a Sunday. And by the way, one of the things that held back the college football playoff specifically was it coincided with the NFL playoffs. And that was drawing more talk. I mean, we talked about that 2 weeks ago, or I guess it was a week ago now, for the Ohio State winning the national title, where it was, it happened the same day as Trump's inauguration and Martin Luther King Day and right after the NFL playoffs. And it became an afterthought, honestly. And it was really problematic. I'm telling you, it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse, even if they adjust it. They could afford, here's the thing, Dave, they could afford to have a bad format this year. The novelty of it alone should have sold it way better than it did. And here's the short-sighted part, because here's what the novelty did. I'll say this up front. The novelty of the college football playoff this year kept the regular season ratings high. The regular season ratings, guys, are going to collapse over the course of the next 10 years, because the biggest selling point college football had that no other sport in the history of sports had was when number one played number two. Up until about 10 years ago, there were national title implications in that game. Mm-hmm. And that was basic. Yeah. I mean,
that maybe as a whole, the viewership will be down slightly. I'll give you some of that, but I don't really think so. I think that there's still the passion for football. So you could see perhaps the regular season drop slightly. I don't think it's going to be significant. because even the fans that I hear that are frustrated by NIL and the transfer portal, and there's a lot out there, there are very few that say I'm out. When I talk to fans, they say I'm reluctantly in. And maybe that's the next step, is saying I'm out. But I don't hear many fans saying I'm so frustrated by NIL because I think morally it was the right thing to do. And the transfer portal, which I think was morally the right thing to do. I don't hear many fans, Caleb, that just say I'm out. I've heard
I
some.
don't
At one
hear,
point, I've heard some.
but this is the mistake you're making. You're talking about the fans. I don't talk about the fans, Dave. I talk about the casuals. What is college football going to do to bring in the casuals? I'm talking about the guy, I'm talking about, Bill's Aunt Gladys over here that maybe once a year watches a sporting event. And maybe that sporting event back in the day would be the college football national title or Alabama versus Auburn if there were two top 5 teams, or Michigan versus Ohio State if it was 1 versus 2. That's not happening anymore. The casual Aunt Gladys isn't about to tune into any of those games. They're going to watch their daytime soap operas instead. And I'm just honest, that's a problem long term for college football. It's not the NFL. My wife likes the Packers, but she's not like a die in the wool like NFL every game fan. She still watched the AFC and NFC title games with me yesterday. And I'm like, college football isn't going to draw the same in that way. It's just, and it was doing that. I don't think there's a college football game anymore that's going to draw in an average Joe Schmo that doesn't really care about college football, but would be like, I'd love to see that game. I bet it'd be a fun game. There were 7 million fewer people watched. There were 7 million fewer viewers per college football playoff game this year than there were last year. 7 million is a lot of people. That's a ton of people. There is a problem. And yes, they formatted it badly. They extended it way too long. It shouldn't be going into the NFL playoffs. All right. They were also losing to the NFL playoffs. Attendance was an issue. And don't even get me started on the fact, Dave, that one of the biggest weekends in college football that's a huge rating draw used to be Conference Championship Week. That was dead this year. How little did people care about Conference Championship Week? Because everybody was going to the playoff.
Dead. How have the changes in college football affected your fandom? A little, a lot, I'm out. How about that? Poll question brought to you by Sports Treasures, carrying over 5 million sports treasures and so much more. Follow on Facebook for the best sports memorabilia daily updates. Go to facebook.com and follow them at Sports Treasures TN, Caleb. So poll question will be that. How have the changes in college football affected your fandom? A little, a lot, I'm out. So we may be joined by a former Vol that we're working on, Steve Hamer, here momentarily, and we'll talk some Tennessee basketball, brought to you in part by the UPS Store Hardin Valley, helping individuals and small businesses, wide range of products and services, locally owned and operated. The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com, as we broadcast live from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studios, East Tennessee's largest volume dealer when it comes to Ford and Lincoln. I feel like this is something we'll get used to. I'm a little older. I've been through this. Free agency, when I saw the Cowboys get ripped apart in the early 90s when free agency hit, and I saw Deion Sanders bouncing all over the league from the Niners to the Cowboys, I'll be honest with you, it was distasteful. And I was like, I don't want to see this, but now I'm used to it. I'm not completely used to it in college football, but I think I will be. Do you, as fans, and feel free to throw us a comment on the message board and we'll make reference to it. Do you feel like you can adjust and switch? Because I think you can. And I think you will.
As a college football fan, I will. College football can make the stupidest decisions possible that I'd be opposed to, and they can move their games to Wednesday afternoon, and I'll be a college football fan because that's like my passion. I love the sport, and I would do it. I would watch every game. But I'm not thinking about myself. I'm thinking about drawing in newer fans long term. Free agency in the NFL, we have proof of it now, brought more parity, and that helped the NFL, Dave, reach a market audience that I think it's like now 47% of NFL fans are women. I guarantee you that number was below 25% before free agency. I almost guarantee you it was below 25% in the 90s. And I think that has made the NFL so marketable. They have taken over Sunday. There are probably deeply religious people that are willing to skip church for NFL games now that wouldn't have been willing to do that in 1995. And so that's the big point. And I also want to point out, it's funny you say Dion. Some people might call Dion a ring chaser more than an actual producer for his teams.
Yeah, but he was a producer. I mean, there's no question about it. What did Dylan have to say there? It's on the message board, Caleb.
Dylan says college football is a lot more regional than the NFL. People in Memphis still root for the Cowboys because that was all that would come on TV back in the day. That's very true, actually. For college football, everyone has their school. Dylan, I get your point, but the problem is a lot of these schools, now maybe NIL will change this, and we're still in the early stages of NIL on the transfer portal, but most schools are very aware that they will never have a shot to compete for any sort of title in college football. And that's, I mean, it's not like college basketball where, let's be fair, Dave, I mean, you know this, if you're in a power conference, if you're any team in a power conference, you can get the right coach and go win a national title. Honestly, there are haves and have-nots in college football. And I'll just say this as someone who was a Maryland grad. Every Maryland fan does not care about college football because they know there is not a chance in hell they will ever compete for a national title in college football. It's not happening and it never will. And there's no way to fix that.
I got a question for you to that regard. What did Adam have to say first on our message board?
That's my point, Dylan, because it's regional, yet truly nationwide. College football generates more revenue, not to the monopoly broadcasting.
Okay, what's more likely in 10 years? That Vanderbilt wins a national championship or the Dallas Cowboys and Tennessee Titans, our favorite two teams, win a Super Bowl? Let's test the parity as you see it, Caleb, because I'll say right now, Vanderbilt is throwing money at their athletic departments and athletic department and the individual programs. They're more likely to win a national championship within the next 10 years than the Cowboys or Titans winning the Super Bowl. Chew on that.
No, not true. Because because here's the thing you're missing. There's so much parity in the NFL, Dave, that incompetent owners can still be successful. The Titans might get lucky. The Titans, if they draft Shedeur Sanders, who you and I both believe in, it has nothing to do with their ownership. They just lucked into potentially a generational talent at quarterback. Look at Jim Irsay, one of the most incompetent human beings in the history of the world. But he got a Super Bowl because he lucked into drafting Peyton Manning. And I mean, so that's the thing with the NFL.
Only person I've ever interviewed that I think was incredibly intoxicated at like 10 in the morning.
Really? Jerry Green wasn't intoxicated at 10 in the morning?
Well, he hit it better. Let's say that. So no, but it was so bizarre.
Jim Irsay, do I not win the argument with Jim Irsay though? What you just said. Jim Irsay's the proof for me.
Probably. But I could flip it with Dan Snyder. He couldn't get anything going.
He never lucked into the top pick with Peyton Manning as the guy. When you get a generational quarterback that's once in a, I mean, look, if Peyton Manning were drafted by like a halfway competent NFL owner, he's got as many Super Bowl rings as Tom Brady. He does.